Good morning, everybody. It's Nigel Farage. I'm here in Manchester, where, of course, the Conservative Party conference kicks off today. Lots and lots of Conservatives arriving today from all around the country, even more protesters, if we believe some of the PR that's being put out by groups like Momentum and others. It is clearly a week that is going to be a very great challenge for Theresa May as Prime Minister. Of that, there's no doubt. It's the first real gathering of the party since a general election that she called, that is seen by many to have been unnecessary, didn't deliver a majority, and breathed life into Corbynism. Joining me to sort of set the scene is LBC's political editor, Theo Ashwood. Theo, good morning.
Very good morning to you, Nigel.
Tell me something. Is this like a sort of happy family wedding where everyone's coming together? Or is it like one of those family weddings where one half of the family haven't spoken to the other half for 30 years and still don't want to?
I think it's the latter, where you have lots of step-parents and children that some people might not quite know about, and there is, I think, perhaps going to be something of an explosion. Theresa May has to hold it together. She's had her first test this morning. It hasn't gone very well in the broadcast.
Now, this was the interview that she did with Andrew Marr, and I was watching that earlier. It's quite interesting at the end. She did appear to go quite red in the face. The eyes looked like they were starting to glisten. I mean, look, I've been in that position myself. I know we can overanalyze some of this, but she did not look comfortable, did she?
She did not look comfortable. She was speaking very, very quickly, which is often a sign of nerves, pressed repeatedly about answering the question. Interesting on Europe, she said that we'd have to accept ECJ law during the transition period. That will go down very badly, Nigel, with many Eurosceptics within her own party, and only adds strength to Boris Johnson's case when he sets down those red lines, as he did in yesterday's Sun newspaper interview.
But that's all well and good, but there's another wing of the party, of course, and as I speak, Michael Heseltine's on a screen behind us, and of course Ruth Davidson, who is in some ways a bit of a rising star in the party. I mean, she was saying yesterday that she wouldn't be totally unhappy if we stayed in a single market in some kind of arrangement. I mean, who's got the upper hand here? Is it the Remainers, who want to kick this into the long grass, want us, as in line with the Florence speech, effectively to sort of sign up to everything under a different badge? Or is it Boris and the Brexiteers? Who's winning this battle?
At the moment, if you want my opinion, who is actually winning this battle, it is the Remainers. Two reasons I'll give you for that. 2 weeks before the Florence speech, Philip Hammond was in a grand committee of MPs and peers, and he then first floated the idea that we actually switched to leaving the European Union at the end of the transition period. That came from the Chancellor Philip Hammond. 2 weeks later, Theresa May says the same thing in Florence when she stands up and makes that speech, which in effect is seen in Europe at least as changing the tone. Michel Barnier, Jean-Claude Juncker now want to do a deal. They feel like they've really won the argument, but, and I don't think you can discount this, the Boris Johnson wing of the party, the Eurosceptics, the Jacob Rees-Moggs, they're a force to be reckoned with, and they have the membership, Nigel. They have the membership.
I think that's the point, isn't it? The parliamentary party, the majority of them voted for us to remain, but of the party faithful who are coming here to Manchester, would it be 70% were Brexit?
Probably more. If you're looking at those who are here, and the key thing is that whoever becomes the next Conservative leader is going to have to win them over. There's a feeling within the party from those that I've spoken to, no more coronations. Coronations are a bad idea because what you have is you have a situation which you had last time with Theresa May. Andrea Leadsom simply stood aside, and somebody put it to me, we didn't get the chance to kick the tyres. And had they had that chance, they would have seen some fragility when it came to Theresa May and her ability to campaign.
Well, I mean, you're right. In the end, it was a coronation, and this has upset people. John Strafford, who is the Campaign for Conservative Democracy, a real veteran of the voluntary side of the party, been around forever, he said yesterday that the Conservative Party membership is now below 100,000, that it's fallen from 150,000 in 2013. I mean, is there a feeling amongst these Conservatives that actually their days as a political party, given their current structures, are effectively numbered?
There is, and I think there are those in the party who are trying to change the course. There's a feeling Jeremy Corbyn tapped into the youth vote like never before. And it's worth remembering this, with George Osborne, he was cynical, he was ruthless in the way that he went after the silver-haired vote.
Yes.
With the way he targeted pensioners in every budget to make sure that they were better off. They're making sure pensions, benefits, savings, whatever it was. And he didn't help those younger voters enough. And now they have to find a way of engaging with younger voters in almost an impossible climate when you're coming up, the Conservative Party are coming up against Jeremy Corbyn, who is promising to scrap tuition fees, in effect overhaul the system. And they need to find a way of saying, well, okay, Jeremy Corbyn won't deliver for you in that, but we can deliver this. And so far,
they're trying to do, aren't
they?
I mean, I'm looking at
freezing fees.
Looking at the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, the Sunday Express, Conservative supporting and leading newspapers, talking about as if it's a revolution on student fees, and that somehow young people are going to come in droves to the Conservative Party.
Because they're going to come out with £30,000 of debt just on their fees, or just shy of £30,000 of debt.
So, I mean, but this appears to be the big pitch at the start of the week, and let's just remind people tuning in that the total annual level of tuition fees will not rise above £9,250 a year, and that students, once they're in work, will not start paying the money back until they're earning £25,000 a year as opposed to 21. I mean, is this the big revolution of the week?
There's been a lot of, how should I put it, mocking on social media about the use of the word revolution in that particular headline on the front of the Sunday Telegraph. And that's the difficulty that Theresa May faces and the government faces, in that they're simply scratching the surface of a very significant problem when it comes to young voters. Now, having said this, and this is what we're going to hear a lot of during this Conservative Party conference, is going to be about moderation. We can actually, this is what the Tories are going to be saying, Jeremy Corbyn might be promising to scrap tuition fees to make it better off, to overhaul the system. What we're going to hear a lot from the Tories about is Jeremy Corbyn, Labour are going too far. What you need is some changes, some small changes that we can actually deliver, so we can freeze tuition fees. That's going to be a theme that runs right through this conference. It's going to be about delivery, and it's going to be about just
they're the responsible party
and the balanced approach,
rather
than trying to simply rip up the system.
Do you think, given, and you've said so yourself, the first May interview has gone pretty badly? I watched it. She virtually refused to answer a single question.
It's very difficult for her to answer any question.
Just didn't answer. I mean, it may be difficult, but you've at least got to be seen to answer a question, and she didn't. Is she going to survive this week?
I think she'll survive this week. I think what's keeping her in power is somebody has to come along within the Conservative Party. They need to put their hand up, and they need to say, or probably more than one person, given that there has to be a contact, people need to put their hands up and say, I'm ready to take on Jeremy Corbyn. Because it is no longer feasible to simply say there'll be a coronation. They need to bounce on to the fact that they would be prepared to call an election. And then, of course, Brexit ties into that. What's their vision for Brexit? The way the party is at the moment in terms of selecting that leader, you'd have to go with a Brexiteer.
And is Boris pitching for that job?
Boris wants that job, absolutely. Of course he wants that job.
And is he going to be the darling of the hall this week?
I think they're going to be two leaders' speeches.
Theo Usherwood, LBC's political correspondent. You're in for a few days of intrigue, I think.
Absolutely.
And I noticed that you're dressed down today. Normally I see you in the LBC London, and you've got a tie on and top button done up. And just explain your dress code today.
The dress code today is a little bit dressed down. We're going to go out and we're going to be speaking to people out in the streets of Manchester about their feelings, because there are going to be some rallies. We're expecting, and we've seen some quite stark images, haven't we, in the front pages of the papers, and of banners saying "Hang the Tories" and effigies of suited men hanging from bridges. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to meet Conservatives. 2 years ago I was here, I was wearing a suit, I was walking in to the conference centre, and I was spat at, and I had spit right down my coat, and so therefore...
And you're only a journalist.
I'm only a journalist.
I can imagine what Tory MPs are going to feel like walking through that.
Well, big questions were asked of Greater Manchester Police. Big questions were asked of Greater Manchester Police last time. I've just driven over, and I've never seen a security presence like it. The roads are blocked off.
They're doing their best, aren't they?
They're doing their absolute best.
The days of class struggle are back. Theo, thank you. Enjoy the next few days. Well, very interesting. I think Theo's comment that there are going to be 2 leader speeches, one from Mrs May and one from Boris Johnson, I think is about right. And these splits are fascinating, aren't they? Because on the one hand, you've got a cabinet that appears to be absolutely irreconcilably split. But my sense is that Theo's right. When it comes to the people in the hall, however, whether it's 3,000 or 4,000 of them, whatever it is, I'm absolutely convinced that most of those people are going to be Eurosceptic. And I just wonder, they may well show what they think over the course of the next few days. As for Mrs May, I have to say, I think as a leader, she is useless. She doesn't answer questions. She has no humour. She's wooden. She shows no empathy with ordinary people whatsoever. And to make it worse, she never delivers. She didn't deliver as Home Secretary. She's not delivering as Prime Minister. She's tried to kick the Brexit can down the road with this transition period, thinking the problem will go away. Actually, it's getting worse. And I think, to be honest with you, support is simply melting away. I think she's in for a very, very difficult time. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here from Manchester at the Tory Party Conference, and the time now is 10:15. Well, it's Theresa May's big week, and there are many that think she's not made a very good start with her first TV interview this morning, where she appeared to flush up a little bit, perhaps even a glisten in the eye, as she was accused of simply not answering any questions. I say accused, actually, factually, she wasn't answering any questions. So I'm asking you, and I'm particularly keen if you're a Tory voter, a party member, or you could be an ex-member, because we've just been told that the Tory membership has dropped below 100,000, which is amazing. When David Cameron became the leader of the Tory party back in 2005, they had nearly 300,000 members. Worth remembering that Corbyn's Labour Party have currently got 570,000 members. So I want to know from you, if you're a Tory supporter, member, ex-member, does she still have your support? If you think yes, absolutely, Theresa's the girl, she must stay as Prime Minister, call me on 0345 6060 973. Or if you think, sorry, Theresa, move over, you can text me to 84850, or perhaps you can suggest another leader, in which case you can, of course, tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage and LBC, and you can follow us from here in Manchester on Facebook Live, where you can comment as well. Now, joining me is the former International Development Secretary, former Chief Whip and Conservative MP for Sutton Coldfield, Andrew Mitchell. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning. Now, does Theresa, come on, let's be frank about this, is she commanding the support of the parliamentary party?
Well, there's no agreement on any successor, and I think that the whole of the parliamentary party recognises that she's not going anywhere at the moment, and therefore will want to focus on the 3 key issues which face Britain and face the Conservative Party at this upcoming conference.
Right, and one of those, of course, is Brexit, Andrew, and I very much enjoyed doing a big Brexit debate in your constituency during the referendum campaign. But, I mean, isn't what she's doing with Brexit just sort of kicking the can down the road? Isn't it effectively satisfying nobody?
Well, we all remember your visit to the Royal Town, Nigel, with great affection when it was packed out in our great town hall.
It was fabulous,
and thank you very much indeed for coming to the Royal Town on that day. I mean, the first key task is to deliver a successful Brexit, and I think that the best thing for the Conservative Party to do is to get behind the negotiator, David Davis, give him their full support as he tries to land what are very difficult negotiations, but land them successfully for Britain. But of course, that's only the first of the key issues at this conference. The other 2 are firstly re-establishing the fundamentals of capitalism and free enterprise. That is the way that we lift the living standards of everyone in a free society. And secondly, to address the huge intergenerational unfairness which characterises Britain today. And those are 3 key great tasks which I think the Tories are well placed to tackle. But the first, as you rightly say, is delivering a successful Brexit.
And in terms of capitalism and free markets, generally, I would have thought Theresa May has been seen to be somebody who's pretty interventionist as opposed to free market. But I'm particularly interested in the third point you raise about, the intergenerational unfairness that there is in the country, and that is certainly true. And Jeremy Corbyn became so popular, Andrew, that a friend of mine, nightclub owner in Kent, said the weekend after the general election, at sort of midnight on the dance floor, you know, the youngsters are chanting, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn." So he did strike a chord. Do you honestly think, do you really think that by saying that the maximum tuition fee being frozen at £9,250 a year, do you really think that is going to get young people coming to you in droves?
Well, it's a minor part of the solution, but of course the absolutely critical area is building more houses. The opportunity to own your own home, to get a foot on the ladder, even to rent at a reasonable price, is greatly diminished from what it was when you and I were youngsters, Nigel.
Well, that's
and
certainly,
we have to tackle that.
No, that's certainly true. So how many houses a year are you going to build?
Well, if I was Theresa May, I'd call in an upwardly mobile Minister of State. I'd say to them that their task over the next 18 months was to ensure that there were 1 million new home starts, and that I'd be monitoring them along the way, and if they succeeded they'd be promoted to the cabinet, and if they didn't match up, then I'd fire them. But the absolutely critical thing is to build more homes in the right places across Britain, and that should be the number one task in tackling that third critical thing, which is dealing with this extraordinary intergenerational unfairness.
And we still have net migration continuing at 250,000 a year. Presumably, if we were to get a grip back on our borders with the European Union and elsewhere, we might need to build fewer houses.
Well, that of course is relevant. We've been looking very carefully in Birmingham at what is the likely future need for homes, and the balancing factor, as it were, is the absolutely unknown levels of inward immigration. So certainly this is something which matters a huge amount to people, and one of the things we'll be able to address in these Brexit negotiations. Yeah,
which I'm afraid have been kicked into the long grass. At least that's my view, and it's Boris's view too, isn't it? And Andrew, you've always been very much a party loyalist. You've always stuck with the leader. You've always, supported the cabinet, the shadow cabinet through your career. Boris Johnson just seems to, he literally undermined the Prime Minister's Florence speech by coming out the weekend before. He's at it again. Does he want to be sacked, or perhaps even more importantly, should Mrs. May sack him?
Well, I think that the collective responsibility in the cabinet is terribly important, and of course it clashes with the desire for authenticity, which is one of the reasons why Jeremy Corbyn has been doing so well, and Boris is an authentic politician. The media think that Boris trimmed his views on Europe in the referendum for personal advantage. I put Boris Johnson on the parliamentary candidates list in 1992.
So it's all your fault, is it?
I can tell you this, that Boris is undoubtedly an authentic Eurosceptic. He has always been deeply sceptical about the European adventure, about the European project, and he feels very strongly about this. So I'm not surprised that he sets out so clearly as he does his views on leaving the European Union.
And how does that fit in, Andrew, to collective responsibility?
Well, I think it would be better, as I say, if all senior Tories got behind the negotiator, gave the negotiator their advice in private, and let the negotiator, David Davis, get on with delivering the best deal for Britain. Okay.
And finally, Andrew, is it going to be a good week for Theresa May?
Well, it'll be a good week if we stick to dealing with those three key issues which you and I have been discussing, Nigel. That will determine how good this week is, whether the Conservative Party is able to focus on that agenda on all the next three important days.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Andrew Mitchell, former International Development Secretary, former Chief Whip, and the Conservative MP for Royal Sutton Coldfield. Well, we've had some views from politicos, some views from me. Let's get some views from the people that really matter, and they're the members of the public. They're the voters. They're the ones that tend to get ignored. Certainly on most TV stations and radio shows, but not here at LBC. Carol in Twickenham, you're on LBC. What do you think?
Well, I was incensed, that's why I phoned you, that how you're sitting there in your ivory tower, there's not one person that can lead this country. The fact that she is leading it, I think good luck to her, personally, because Boris Johnson, yourself, you couldn't wait to get us out of out of Brexit, okay? But you're just sitting there, aren't you, criticising? Oh.
No, I'd like to be full of... Carol, I'd love to be full of praise. I'd love to say, this Prime Minister is fantastic. Do you know, she stood up earlier this year at Lancaster House, and then she called a general election. She said Brexit means Brexit. She said no deal is better than a bad deal. We're going to crack on and do this. And I have to say, I did, on LBC, praise that speech she gave Carol back earlier in the year. I thought, this is wonderful. She really means this. And now we're in October and she's done none of it, just kicked the whole thing into the long grass. So this is not personal against Mrs. May, Carol. It is, for me, that she's not delivering Brexit.
I just wish that she could just turn round and leave everybody to it and say, you got us in this mess, you get us out of it. But she was the only person that they had. And instead of criticising all the way, they need to be backing her. I don't want it, but someone's got to do it. And there's not one man that can do it. Not one. And if Boris Johnson tries to look like leadership material, what a joke.
Well, Boris, I think, fancies his chances, Carol, and who's to say if the Prime Minister goes on having as bad a week as the start she's had this morning, maybe by the end of the year we'll see a different leader. Carol, I thank you. And Carol saying the Prime Minister needs support, and I think the point that I'm making back is she would deserve support if she was actually delivering. Theresa the appeaser is toast. She is utterly useless. Time for Jacob Rees-Mogg to rise. That comes from Gordon by Twitter. I'm sure I'll get a few more of those as the course of the morning develops. I'm Nigel Farage, live from Manchester for the Conservative Party conference. The time now is 10:30. Prime Minister May has arrived in Manchester, given her first interview. It's not necessarily seen to have gone all that well, and the Tory clans are gathering. But her leadership is in some doubt. She hasn't really been able to deliver. She doesn't come across as being particularly decisive, and the party does appear to be at war over Brexit. Mind you, there's nothing particularly new about that. Now, we just before the break had Andrew Mitchell from Royal Sutton Coldfield, and he says, look, it's all fine. Just give David Davis the authority and Theresa's the right leader and it's all going to be great. But I wonder what, when I say Sir Bill Cash is a veteran Eurosceptic, I mean that in the nicest possible sense, Bill. Good morning.
Nigel, I think you're a veteran as well, aren't you?
Well, I've only been doing this for 25 years as a Eurosceptic. You've been doing it rather longer than that, I think.
Well, I know.
Now, tell me something, Bill.
By the way, Neil Hamilton sends his best wishes. I happened to bump into him last night. I'm sure you'll love that.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thank you. That cheers my Sunday morning up no end. Bill, you were passionate in that referendum campaign about Brexit for all the reasons that we know. Is this Prime Minister, the leader of your party, holding faithful to that vote, in your opinion?
Well, let's get a few facts straight. First of all, the referendum was passed in the House of Commons by 6-1. In fact, the notification of withdrawal act was passed by 494 to 105 or 110 or something. And we got the repeal bill, which, as you know, I did the original draft of, was accepted by the government, and that went through with a majority of 36, which in the circumstances was pretty good. And we're now moving into the committee stage. So in terms of delivery, the answer is we are on track.
Are we?
And
Are we?
I also would say that the intransigence that's being demonstrated by the EU in the shape of Juncker and that dreadful speech, which I'm sure I know you deeply resented, and so did I, and also the Barnier approach is actually creating a circumstance in which I think more and more people are saying, well, if that's what they were saying, if that's what they'd been saying before the referendum, we'd have got a vote of around 70%.
I don't doubt that, Bill. And in fact, that Juncker speech, I was sitting right next to him when he delivered it, and I did respond to it. But the point I'm making is we didn't vote for a transition period. We didn't vote to go on paying £10 billion a year. We didn't vote for open-door immigration to the European Union to continue for 5 years minimum after the Brexit vote. And yet this is what a Conservative Prime Minister is saying we should do.
Well, I thought, despite what you said about her appearance on the MAR programme about half an hour ago, I actually thought that she dealt quite effectively with this question about EU jurisdiction after we ceased to be in the treaties on the 30th of March 2019. I've been really on this the whole time over the last few months, as indeed have others, including Boris and various other people. And the reality is that as long as we are not subject to EU jurisdiction and the European Court after the 30th of March 2019, when the treaties cease, then that is what we said we would deliver. Now, there is still a lot of debate because we're going into the committee stage of the repeal bill, and there are those who want to extend the implementation period into including European jurisdiction. And that is going to be a major debating point in about 10 days' time in the House of Commons. What I can say is the Labour Party have absolutely done a complete U-turn.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Reversed. I mean, it's so disgraceful, Nigel. And you and I, we debated together in the Oxford Union. You know, you and I know one another really well, and we know this territory. And it's outrageous the way the Labour Party have behaved.
I agree with that. There are millions of Labour voters out there going to feel very betrayed by it. But tell me, Bill, does this Prime Minister, Bill, given the process we're engaged in, does this, in a word, does she have your support to stay on as Prime Minister through the Brexit process?
Yes, she does, and I'll tell you why. Very simply, because, as I've explained, we are on track. There are difficulties which are coming from the European Union. There are issues which have yet to be completely clarified, but actually that will be resolved during the course of the committee stage that I've just said. In addition to which, when we repeal the European Communities Act, and you above all, with me and other people who've been in this business for a long time know perfectly well that the idea that we would have been able to repeal the European Communities Act 1972 was a sort of holy grail, which we never really thought that any other previous government would do. It is being done. It's there in black and white in that withdrawal bill. It was going to be called the Great Repeal Bill, but it's now called the Withdrawal Bill. And basically, it's enormous progress, Nigel. I know that you must accept that.
Well, it's progress, but it's not what actually most people who voted Brexit thought they were getting. But no, I take the point. The legal process is moving forward. So, Bill Cash, thank you very much for joining us this morning. So there you've got two sides of a Tory party, and they're uniting around Mrs May as Prime Minister. But in some senses, folks, they have to do that because it's the Tory party conference and they need to show some unity, even though there are some that want this kicked down the road forever and there are others that would like it to happen more quickly. I wonder what Tony in Fareham makes this. Tony, does this Prime Minister have your support?
She did, but not anymore, I'm afraid, Nigel. It's too late, really, to start talking about tuition fees and first-time buyers now. That territory has been hijacked by Jeremy Corbyn. I was screaming at her, absolutely screaming at her during the election to address the young and to address what you quite rightly identified as generational unfairness, and that is to cut tuition fees, perhaps by half, for a couple of years, and then reintroduce it on a slower basis. Put up the national minimum wage to £9 an hour. Increase the basic tax threshold, and most importantly, put in a penny on income tax to pay for this, which I think most of the British population would have worn quite happily. I would have, no problem at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tony, her problem, and you're right, that Corbyn has taken this territory very, very firmly. The other problem, I think, is saying, I mean, half of this package on tuition fees, half of it is, hey, good news, guys, we are not going to increase the maximum you can be charged every year from any more than £9,250. all that does, Tony, is to remind people how much it's been cranked up over the last few years anyway.
Well, exactly, and young people can see that, and they will be looking at her statement today and just grinning, all of from ear to ear, really, because she had the opportunity to address this, and those two foolish people who were her advisors, I can't remember their names now, but I could have sat down with her and said, please don't do this, because
Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill is who you're thinking of, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I beg your pardon. Yes, and I would have said to her, don't do this. You have to address the young, because I could have forecast that that's what Corbyn would have done, and he's done it very
Well, he's done it. He's done it. And the other thing she's saying is that you haven't got to start paying this back until you earn £25,000 a year, not £21,000 a year, and that'll save 30 quid a month. But you know what, Tony? They're still charging 6% interest on these student loans, despite where the base rate is. Tony, is it time she went?
Yeah, I think it is, yes. And, she was exposed as Home Secretary as weak. She butchered the police service, absolutely butchered the police service. She failed miserably on migration numbers, and she's just not strong enough, Nigel, to take us out of Europe. She's not a strong personality, and I think the party is in danger of losing all credibility now with infighting. It needs someone to take charge.
So who?
Well, I know you're going to laugh. It's Jacob Rees-Mogg.
I love the enthusiasm of Mogg supporters, but isn't it really rather unlikely that somebody on the backbenches, charming though Jacob is, who's had no ministerial experience at all, isn't it rather unlikely that he becomes the next Tory leader?
I think it possibly is, but I think he's got a huge amount of support out there because he's a clever speaker. He's very good at backing up his statements with facts. He answers questions directly. He looks people in the eye and answers them directly. Mm-hmm. The only other alternative for me is perhaps David Davis, but. Okay. Boris, I'm really not sure about.
Okay. Well, Tony, thank you very much indeed. And Tony, there we are, somebody who was a Conservative voter, who isn't a Conservative voter any longer because he simply doesn't have confidence in Theresa May. It's not easy for her, though, in one way, is it? Because we've got, as David tells me, there are 25 people in the Tory cabinet and only 7 of them are for leave, which gives more decision-making power to Remainers. That's what David said. And David, you're right. Actually, the Remainers have been leading this, and with Boris coming out and saying that we shouldn't have a transition period more than 2 years, I wonder whether Boris actually wants a transition period at all. That cabinet is very split. Doesn't make her life easy, but boy, she's not so far coming across as being a true leader. I'm Nigel Farage, live from Manchester for the Conservative Party conference, and the time now is 10:45. Theresa May is struggling. That's my view. We've had members of Parliament on from Remain and from Brexit, and they're all pretending it's great and it's going really well. But we all know the truth is, actually, it isn't. I think Boris Johnson, in many ways, exposes that. And then the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, then takes him on. So really, the battle between the two of them, they're completely different visions for Brexit, how it should happen, when it should happen. That is the fundamental fault line, I think, in this Conservative Party. And indeed, you could argue it's a fault line that's been there within Conservatism going way back to 1972. The difference is now they're in government and it's their job to put Brexit into place, and so the pressure is really, really on. Now, I'm looking for someone to have a private lunch with me. Thanks to Franco's Italian restaurant in central London, you can bid to join me for a private lunch, and not only will it be great food, but we'll do it on a Friday when I'm not broadcasting in the evening, so we can do it properly, if you understand what I mean. Why are we doing it? Well, it's because of Global Radio's Make Some Noise charity, supporting youngsters and their families living with illness, disability, or a lack of opportunity. And by supporting Global's Make Some Noise charity, little projects are ones where we can make an enormous difference. So the auction prize is there. Bids are coming in. It closes at 7:45 on Thursday, the 5th of October this week. You've got to be 18 to enter and to come to lunch with me. And you can simply bid. If you want to bid, see what the price is now, go to lbc.co.uk and read those important terms and conditions. back to our callers. David in Birmingham. Is Theresa May somebody that still gets your support?
Absolutely, Nigel. And I think what it is, somebody has to lead a team. She's leading the team, and as you've already seen, 2 ministers on today that have said that they'll get behind her. The process is on track. Negotiations on negotiations. All sorts of ideas are put into that. Opinions are like belly buttons. But what has struck me this morning, though, Nigel, is the way that you've criticised the Conservatives and you're trying to divide that party, yet you've got a divided party yourself. I mean, you've just called one of the leadership candidates a Nazi and a racist, and 21% of the people that voted for her, the same.
Well, actually, David, I haven't used...
Nigel.
David, I haven't used either of those words. Where are you inventing that from?
Nigel, this has come across. You've told us to leave.
So you've just come on the radio, David, and said that I've used these two words. I haven't used them.
Nazis and racist, 21% of the people you've called. It's over Twitter. People.
Oh dear! Right, David. David, there's no point having this argument. I haven't called her that, and we will talk about that. In fact, at 11:30, we'll talk about that. Do you know what? At 11:30, David, we are going to interview the new leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton, and we will talk about that particular candidate.
Have you said that you and these various MEPs would have left your party if Anne-Marie Waters was elected?
Yes, that's right, I have. But anyway, we'll do it at 11:30. David, you're boring me. I'm sorry. We're talking about the Prime Minister and whether she can survive the week. I wonder what Lisa in Redcar makes of that proposition. Lisa, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Not a bit.
I believe that Theresa May has basically... She's ruined what we wanted. It wasn't the Brexit we voted for. We wanted it now. And she's now made a transition period of around 2 years, which probably translates to more. I think that what we really, really need is a pro-Brexit Prime Minister running our country.
And if we... I mean, right now, Lisa, would you vote for this Conservative Party with Theresa May as Prime Minister?
Absolutely not, no.
But would you vote Conservative if, let's say, Boris was Prime Minister?
No, I think, to be honest, the one person who I really have faith in to lead our country to greatness, into history for Brexit, would be yourself. I think we really need...
Well, that's kind of you, but at the minute I'm not quite in that position, and
I know.
You know, we have to face reality, Lisa, and where we are. But you feel let down by her, and she's basically kicking the can down the road, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree. I can't disagree with that, Lisa, at all. I thank you very much for your call. June in Wimbledon says, the reason for the coronations of Prime Minister is that Clegg had the bright idea of 5-year parliaments. This should be repealed at once. That's part of it, I think. Anne in Barnstable says, I feel sorry for Theresa May. Let's not forget, she wouldn't be in this position if David Cameron hadn't had a hissy fit and flounced off, leaving the country to it. Trying times. Anne in Barnstable feeling quite sorry for the Prime Minister. Penny in similar vein says, I watched the interview with Andrew Marr. He was very aggressive and tried to get her to answer hypothetical questions. She's not my favourite PM, but I feel the media need to back off and stop trying to create news. Penny, I tell you what, the one thing I would say about Andrew Marr and that programme is he does ask good questions, but he's never aggressive. I've been interviewed by him, I don't know, 8, 9 times. I honestly, I don't think that interview was aggressive. I think it was when he said to her quite gently, you know, you're simply not answering any of my questions, was the moment at which she flushed up and started to look very awkward and very, very embarrassed. So I honestly, I don't buy the line that what she faced this morning was in any way aggressive at all. James is calling me from Finchley in North London. James, are you a May supporter?
Absolutely not.
Right.
I never liked the woman, and I think she's proved an old adage, nothing succeeds in public and commercial life like failure. And she was a rotten Home Secretary, and she's a rotten Prime Minister. For the good of the country, she should go now, and if she was really concerned for the country, she'd have made you the chief negotiator to deal with those so-and-sos in the European Union.
Well, she won't even speak to me, James, but I'm way beneath her. I'm a member of the lower orders, but that's by the by. So if she was to
get... member of the Conservative Party.
Sorry.
Not anymore, through her.
Right, so you were a member and you've left, yeah?
Yes. I joined UKIP.
Right, okay. I'm
hovering now because you've left as leader. I know why you left as leader, and I appreciate why you did it, and I sympathise with your reasons. But I'm afraid, unless the new chap is tough and strong, it'll fizzle out.
Well,
but anyway, Mrs. May...
That's a UKIP debate, which we are going to have in half an hour's time, James.
May, the May woman, is an absolute disaster. She's all powerful to be impotent, and the sooner she goes, the better. It's as if she's like a second Neville Chamberlain who didn't want to fight the Germans, and she has no heart to deal with getting out of the European Union. She doesn't believe in it.
Right, so James, let me ask you, let's say she has an absolute mayor here this week in Manchester and says, do you know what, I've got to go. You know, the party doesn't really support me. They may come on shows on Sunday mornings and pretend it's all happy families, but it isn't. Should the Conservative Party anoint somebody to replace her or go through a messy leadership election?
I think they should choose somebody who would emerge. And who would have the prime concern to get us out of the European Union at all costs. I mean, the woman is a liar. She turned around and said, "No deal."
That's a bit strong for a Sunday morning, James. I mean, look, let's not call her that. It's Sunday morning. But James, I do sense your deep dissatisfaction with the way she's leading the Brexit process. And I've got time for one more call. Charlotte is calling me from the Forest of Dean.
Oh, good morning, Nigel.
Good morning. So, is she up to the job? Should she stay? Is it time she went?
No, she's not up to the job. The interview on Maya this morning was absolutely embarrassing. And I feel that since her speech at Florence, we're all going to get sold down the river. 17.4 million Brexit voters have just been sold down the river, and we now have no real party to rely on or to present our views in any kind of positive way. As far as I'm concerned, we've not only got a Vichy Parliament, we've also got a Vichy government, but we've also got a Vichy Parliament, in my view.
Wow, well, that's a very strong note to end that hour's debate on, and thank you very, very much indeed. Well, coming up, leading businessman and co-founder of the Leave.eu campaign is coming on after the break to say that Brussels must not be allowed to boss Britain around. It's time we stood up and said we're ready to walk away. So, should Mrs. May be prepared to walk away from these negotiations? If you think absolutely we've had enough of Mr. Juncker and the crew, then call 0345 6060 973, or if you think no, we've got to stick it out in the national interest, text to 84850 or tweet more or less whatever you like using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Stay tuned, because we'll also be speaking to the new leader of UKIP, and it all starts next.
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.